Hello again and welcome to our latest video here on the YouTubes. My name is Jay Tate. I am publisher of AuburnSports.com, and today we're going to take a look at Auburn's next opponent, which is the Ole Miss Rebels, through the eyes of Pro Football Focus. First of all, I want to thank you for being part of the video and taking time to watch what we're doing here, and also to let you know that Auburn and Ole Miss are scheduled to play this weekend, Saturday night, inside Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, Alabama. That game is scheduled to kick off at 6 o'clock on ESPN. Let's take a look at Ole Miss's schedule so far this season, and you can see it's not a pretty picture. They open up with a close loss to Memphis. They were definitely better than Arkansas that day. Against Sela, kind of an uneven performance. Lost a controversial game against the Cal Golden Bears at home. I thought they had a touchdown late. The referees saw it differently. They had a tough outing against Alabama. What a lot of people have that, particularly in Tuscaloosa. Played their best game of the season against the Vanderbilt Commodores and really just flattened those guys. I know Vanderbilt's kind of disappointing, I guess, or their typical Vandy this year. But occasionally, Vanderbilt plays well. Not that day. Ole Miss shut them down completely. Lost at Missouri in a game that was fairly competitive. I thought Missouri would win the game, and they did, but I thought Ole Miss played fairly well in that game. And then this one was really bad. Their last game was home against A&M. I thought Ole Miss was at least equal to A&M, if not a little bit bigger. But they had some key mistakes in that game, particularly Plumlee, that one of their quarterbacks that they play with a lot, had one of those Bo Nix type runs like he had against Florida where he's like spinning this way and that way. And instead of Bo Nix just going down, as Plumlee goes down, he fumbles. And A&M gets the scoop and score, and that ended up being that one touchdown was the difference in the game. So, disappointing season so far for Ole Miss. I don't necessarily think Rebels fans were like expecting undefeated or anything like that, but to be 3-5 with the coordinator talent that they have, Mike McIntyre from Colorado, who was the head coach at Colorado, Rich Rodriguez, you might remember from West Virginia years ago, more recently at Arizona. Those are their two coordinators, and those guys are really good at what they do. So maybe the expectations were a little bit higher based on that. But they're 3-5. They've had an off week coming into this game against Auburn, so maybe that will give them an opportunity to scheme up a little something. Let's take a look at their top performers this year through the Pro Football Focus grades. Number one is Elijah Moore, their number one wideout. And for me, one of the best wideouts in the conference. What's great about him is not only is he just a good player, but he is relied on so heavily, and yet he answers the bell every single time. He's just super reliable, super good. He knows this team needs him. They throw at him all the time, and he just comes through time and again. I mean, he's just good, solid, very, very useful SEC wideout. And I should start by saying, as we work our way down, will these guys start for Auburn? Elijah Moore would absolutely start at Auburn. I mean, he's a really, really good player. Jerry and Ely is like their change of pace number two tailback. Still grades out pretty well at 72.9. 5'8", 5'9" kind of guy. Quick, multi-purpose back. Prefers to run outside. Has good speed and very good hands. Like, you know how sometimes tailbacks catch a ball and they're freaking out as soon as they catch it and they get all startled and stuff. No, not Ely. He catches the ball smoothly, just like he was a wide receiver. And I think that's a big part of what they do. Their pass game, obviously they throw a lot of balls for Elijah Moore, but their number two option in the passing game is going to be their tailbacks. Matt Corral, I'm going to probably go ahead and bracket Matt Corral and John Rice Plumlee together. I don't really understand what they're doing with these guys from a personnel perspective. They kind of mix and match them. I noticed in the A&M game there were drives where Plumlee would be playing, and then all of a sudden they would just sub in Matt Corral for a few plays and then sub in Plumlee again. I mean, it's just random, and I don't really see any rhyme or reason. Matt Corral is a slightly better passer, but he can run. And then Plumlee is a much better runner than a passer, but he's an okay passer, and he's been fairly careful as far as interceptions go. Both of them have. So they're not necessarily giving you a lot of pluses, but they're not necessarily giving you a lot of minuses either. I don't know if that's a great statement of, the situation at quarterback for any program. You don't really want to hear that, but that's the situation. Scotty Phillips is their fourth-rated player so far, 72.3. He's their ace number one tailback and has been for a minute. I mean, if you guys have been watching Ole Miss, he's been there for a long time. He's a senior this year. And the things that I said about Ely are basically the same things about Scotty. Smaller guy, 5'8", prefers to run outside, good pass reception guy. I mean, it's obvious what Ole Miss likes in their tailbacks. They want a guy that can do a lot of different things, and both of those guys can do that. Scotty Phillips is super reliable. Would he start at Auburn? No, he wouldn't start at Auburn. Maybe he would now with Booby on the shelf, although I would prefer to give carries to DJ Williams myself. But Scotty Phillips, yeah, he'd definitely play at Auburn. The quarterback situation, no, I think Auburn would rather have what they have. And then Ely, to me, Auburn would love to have him, yeah, because he's a freshman, and you're going to get – he's good right now, and then you get several years out of him to develop, and he would be really good in time. Taking a look at their defensive players, this is really, for me, the big story at Ole Miss. Aside from the fact that they hired the two really good coordinators, they've made some serious progress on defense. Now, on offense, it's kind of I can't really tell yet because of the quarterback situation. But their defense, Mike McIntyre has come in there, and he has made sense of what they needed to do. Ole Miss's number one problem last year was they couldn't stop anybody from running. I mean, I bet there were high school teams that could run fairly effectively against Ole Miss last year. That is not the case anymore. He has found some guys that will plug some gaps up front. And when you've got guys who can do that, even if they're not giving you a lot in the pass rush or even having explosive plays against the run, if you can just get in there and hold a gap in the A gaps, that's going to give you a really good starting point to make progress against the run, and that's exactly what Ole Miss is doing. Josiah Coatney is a guy that really helps them as far as that goes. He's number 40, a little odd number for a defensive tackle, but nonetheless, he can play nose a little bit. He can play three tech. You can see him kind of sliding in and out depending on the snap as far as where he's going to line up, so that gives you some variability there. 6'4", 325. To me, he looks like an offensive lineman. And a lot of times those inside guys and defense are just kind of big old tubby-looking dudes like Tyler Shelvin for LSU last week. That's not what Coatney looks like. To me, he looks like Prince Tega, something like that. And I feel like he plays a little bit high when I was watching him in the A&M game, but he's still pretty strong, and he was holding gaps. I think that's why he grades out so well. He's where he's supposed to be, and he's doing what he's supposed to do. And I mean, that's more than half the battle, honestly. Benito Jones is a guy that plays beside him. Benito's a little bit bigger, a little bit shorter, and a little bit bigger. Plays nose, plays three technique. Again, a guy that doesn't give you a lot of explosiveness inside, but he can definitely hold a gap, and that's a good starting point. Austrian Robinson plays defensive end. I noticed him more on the right in the games that I have seen, but I think they move back and forth a little bit. Solid player, 6'4", kind of long. Can give you some pass rush, but I think he's more of a run guy at this point. Just solid defensive end. Sam Williams, to me, is the guy that sticks out the most when I watch this defense. A guy that grew up here in Montgomery. It's where I'm from. Went to Lee High School. He was a teammate of Daniel Thomas, the starting safety at Auburn, and also Henry Ruggs at Alabama, if it matters. And he's a guy who was a JUCO, has come in, and I think he's got a lot of explosiveness to his game, and I think it just took a little time for him to get to Ole Miss, get acclimated with everything that they're doing during the game, and just get settled. And I thought he really came out well against A&M the other day. He had 2 sacks, 6'3" guy. Definitely gives you more athleticism than I think some of these other cats. And he's playing more, and I think he's going to be a really good player the second half of the season, like this game going forward, and then next year I think he's going to be really good for them, grading out at 70.4. And then in the backfield, Miles Hartsfield is their best cover guy. Cornerback, I don't really have a lot to say about him. I mean, their pass defense is nondescript at best, but Miles Hartsfield is the best of those guys in the back. Taking a look at Ole Miss from a strengths and weaknesses standpoint. Taking a look here at their weaknesses. Number one for me is uncertainty at quarterback. To me, I have no idea what they're doing at quarterback. They mix and match like you wouldn't believe. Sometimes in the same drive. It's kind of like that stuff Spurrier used to do, but I don't necessarily think there's any genius there. I think you've just got a situation where they have 2 quarterbacks with slightly different strengths, and they're not sure which one they like better, and they're not sure which one deserves to have more development time, and so they just kind of mix and match, hoping that maybe somebody will pop up. And they're both just kind of okay. Matt Corral, to me, is a better passer. He completes his passes at about a 60% clip, which Auburn fans would take for sure. And then Plumlee's more like 47%, but he definitely can run the ball. I think he has 500 rushing yards this year. Is just kind of a part-time guy at quarterback, right? So I mean, I think both of those guys are intriguing talents. I feel like they've got to settle on one and go with it. And until that happens, it's going to have an effect on the offense. I mean, the numbers that Ole Miss puts up on offense are just kind of pedestrian to me. Not that they're bad, they're just kind of there. Offensive line is just okay, which is not a great thing to say about a team that likes to run the football as much as Ole Miss does with Rich Rodriguez. He and Malzahn come from the same basic place philosophically where they want to run the football. There are some differences, though. Specifically, Ole Miss doesn't really use an H. They have a tight end, but they use him as like a receiver type guy. So you don't see much H, and you see a lot of two tailback sets where if Auburn has two backs, it's a tailback and an H. If Ole Miss has two tailbacks, it's two tailbacks flanking the quarterback, and they like to use it that way. And another difference between Ole Miss or what Rich Rodriguez does and what Gus does, Gus, I think, would prefer to run between the tackles. He really is big on power running for what it's worth. I don't know as though Auburn's really powerful running the football this year. I think Rich Rod would rather just have speed off the edge and just get outside more quickly. So when Malzahn uses his H to kind of augment the point of attack, I think Rich Rod would say, hey, man, I don't really need the blocking as much. I just need to get to the point of attack as quickly as I can, and we'll worry about it later. Slightly different ideas off the same basic philosophy. I noticed their three weakness. Number three weakness for me is their coverage. Pass defense is just so. I think they're 8th in the SEC right now as far as passing yards conceded per game. Defenses would prefer probably not to run against Ole Miss at this point because the run defense is improving and it's much better. But so the coverage system gets a lot of work. I will give Ole Miss credit for this. They have 8 picks this year, so those guys can catch the ball back there and burn you that way. But as far as coverage goes, probably too many busts to call them anything more than just pedestrian at this point, and it's just so. Wideout depth, mentioned earlier, of course, Elijah Moore is a badass, and I really like what their tailbacks do in the passing game. But their number 2 receiver, number 3 receiver, number 4 receiver, they just don't really stand out to me, and they don't get a whole lot of work either. So from a defensive standpoint, I think everybody can feel comfortable, particularly the upper division teams like Auburn with their defense. They can feel comfortable going man-on-man with those guys. And that probably gives Kevin Steele more freedom to do some things creatively with his defense as far as blitzing and where you want to come from on the blitzes. You want to bring safeties, you want to bring corners, nickels, et cetera, et cetera. And then third down defense. I wouldn't say it's a huge weakness for Ole Miss. I think they're middle of the pack. But I noticed against A&M they had some trouble with that. And I think they're conceding on third down around 38% of the time. And you'd like to see it better. Again, Ole Miss was a train wreck on the defensive side of the ball last year. So, I mean, they've made a ton of progress. But I still feel like their first down and second down defense is far superior to their third down defense at this point. All right, taking a look at Ole Miss's strengths now. The number one thing for me is Isaiah Moore is a game changer. I think he's an incredibly reliable and good wide receiver. He gives those young quarterbacks somebody to look for in the clutch. And you can just put that thing up and let him go out there. Now, he's not built like Seth Williams, who's a big, tall dude that challenges for balls. Moore is like a shorter dude, more compact dude, but he will absolutely get open and he will catch the football. Number 2 strength for me is utility at tailback. Love what Ely does. Love what Scotty Phillips does. They're not big bruisers, but they will hurt you on the outside. They are quick. They are durable, and they're very good pass receivers of the ball, we'll say. One thing I want to mention, though, before we get out of this is Ole Miss's offensive line is not particularly good. We mentioned that on the weaknesses part. As it applies to this, they're better on the right side. Their right guard, whose name I need to get here, Ben Brown, and their right tackle, Alex Givens. Those are their 2 top-graded offensive linemen. And no surprise, since they're both on the right, Ole Miss favors running to the right. I would think they have 31 or 32 explosive run plays this year, and 20 of them are off right end. So they definitely favor going that direction. They will run left and right, but they're just a lot better running to their right, and particularly on the outside, because both of their tailbacks would prefer to get to the edge and do their damage that way. Number 3 strength for Ole Miss, from my perspective, their run defense is a whole lot better. I wonder a little bit if Auburn's going to be able to knock Ole Miss off the ball. That's kind of the assumption at this point, that Auburn's a much better team than Ole Miss, and they'll just run them over, and I don't think that's going to happen. Not to say that Auburn can't run the football, but if those inside guys can kind of hold the gaps like they've been doing these last few games, I think Auburn's going to have to push a little bit harder to get what they want to get out of the run game. Ole Miss has tons of depth on the defensive line. I think their top 6 ranked players, starters and like bit players, backup players, top 6 guys overall rated on the defense were all defensive linemen. So they can definitely rotate those guys in and give you a lot of fresh guys, particularly at edge, but also inside a little bit. And that's going to help them stay fresh when they're having to go against a team like Auburn that can really wear you out if you're not careful. And then their 5th strength, as I mentioned this earlier, sticky fingers against the pass. They're not great on coverage, but they will intercept a pass, and those guys will challenge for the football and catch it. So that's something that Auburn's going to have to keep an eye out for sure. Well, guys, that's my look at the Ole Miss Rebels through the eyes of Pro Football Focus. Again, too long didn't read or too long didn't watch. Ole Miss defense better, specifically the run defense. Ole Miss offense kind of confusing to me. Likes to run the football, would prefer to run it wide. Don't understand what they're doing at tailback. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel here. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up if you appreciate the effort. I certainly appreciate you taking time to watch this video. Thank you very much. Until I see you again, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.